Welcome to the Good Trouble Show. I'm Matt Ford. Today's guest has spent 6 years interviewing every major witness, researcher, and insider in the UFO world. Over 1,000 podcast episodes, and now he's picked the 30 cases that actually matter and put them into one book. His podcast is That UFO Podcast. His new book is called Atlas of Unidentified Flying Objects and Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena. So everyone can see that there without the glare. Anyway, please welcome to the show, Andy McGrillen. Andy, how are you, sir?
Good morning, afternoon, evening, Matt, wherever you are, whatever time zone folks are in. I'm very well. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Well, thanks for joining us. So, I have been a fan of your show for quite some time. Your interview style is absolutely fantastic. I love the guests, and your show is definitely on my regular list of shows that I definitely listen to. So thanks for coming on the show. So this is your first time on the show. Tell us a bit about yourself. Where did you grow up? What's your sort of background? And then we'll get into the whole thing of how you got into this whole UFO business.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the kind words, obviously. So my name's Andy McGrillen. I am quite clearly not from the US. I was born and raised in Glasgow, Scotland, and that is part of the UK. I stayed there most of my life. The last 13 years, I've lived in the northeast of England, just outside of a place called Newcastle. And yeah, as a kid, always had a big interest in the UFO topic. Generally, kind of, you'd call them mysteries, I suppose, as a kid. I used to be really into like the Loch Ness Monster, the pyramids of Egypt, UFOs, not so much ghosts. That always scared me and still does. So I'm not a big fan of the ghost topic, not through any lack of belief, but just I don't want to see any. So, don't send any my way, folks. And yeah, I had a sighting when I was about 10 and 11 years old. Do you want me to talk about that just now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, why not? So yeah, I used to go to the Boys Brigade in the UK, and that's similar to like a Scouts type organisation. And leaving the church one night, I always have to preface, I'm not religious. They just host these things in churches. And I was crossing the road in a really busy area with 4 other people, my mum, my sister, my friend and his mum. And it was like a winter's night, late October, November time in Glasgow, clear sky. But this object wasn't high up in the sky. About half a mile along a really busy road, no fields, no countryside, all houses and shops that were open, cars driving up and down. There was a kind of big sports field, and just sort of behind that, you could see almost like a Ferris wheel, but it was tilted at an angle about maybe 30 degrees, 25 degrees, something like that, spinning incredibly fast. Now, if it was a Ferris wheel, everyone was dead because of the speed this thing was going, or they would have been thrown off it. And besides, it was so local to where I lived. It was the mid-90s. You would have known if there was something like that on in the area, and there wasn't. You couldn't even see the bottom of this object for the houses and trees. That's how kind of close it was. And we kind of saw it. We looked at it for a short while. And I remember my mum and my friend's mum thinking and saying, that looks weird. I thought, wow, that looks like a big UFO on its side. Couldn't make out. If I said it was a flying saucer, I'd be lying. Just it was kind of saucer-ish in shape on its side with the lights going round and round really fast. And we didn't stay for too long. We carried on home. We lived sort of diagonally the other direction. If this was at 2 o'clock, we lived at 10 o'clock. And we headed on home. And yeah, that always stuck with me to this day.
I can imagine. So, does your mom still talk about this particular incident?
She will talk about it. She doesn't remember much other than we saw something weird. It's funny, anyone who was with me that night, my friend who I'm not really in touch with, we're Facebook friends, as many folks are, 30 odd years on. I asked him about it a few years ago when I started the podcast, and he says he remembers it, but not too much, couldn't tell you exactly what he saw. My sister says something similar, saw some strange object, couldn't draw it down. I tend to remember most of the detail. I remember it really clearly, still in my memory. Some folks might raise an eyebrow and say, isn't that convenient for a UFO podcast host? That memory for me, however, has never changed. It's kind of stuck with me, the detail of the night.
It's interesting. You hear that so much from so many people, especially a kind of group sighting where one person remembers one thing and another person maybe recalled seeing something completely different, and then same with the third. But also what is interesting is what you're pointing out. You will often hear one person will vividly remember the entire thing, but then other people will be like, yeah, I don't really kind of remember what I saw, or is a little bit fuzzy. I just think it's really fascinating. I don't know if it's an issue of like how people process it or whether they think it was like a big deal. But yeah, that's really something else. I'm curious, did your mom ever say that she had seen anything anomalous prior to that? Like, any indication that it runs in the family?
Nah, she is not interested in the UFO topic whatsoever. She knows I've got a book. She's got a copy of that. She's very proud. She knows I do a podcast. I think if I asked her what's my podcast called, she wouldn't have any idea. If you ask her about the subject of UFOs, she'll say, well, there must be something out there, but I don't believe these things are coming here. That's as far as her interest goes. So yeah, nothing ever going back. My interest in all the kind of weird stuff that I was into growing up as a kid, I was quite geeky, would come from my gran. No sightings that I remember. She passed away a few years ago. But yeah, it was all kind of stemmed from those kind of conversations as a kid with her.
Yeah, I think I was about 9 when I really sort of became interested in all that kind of stuff. And I think it may have actually started with the Loch Ness Monster. I was very fascinated by that whole thing. And then, of course, Bigfoot and whatnot. So Andy, when did you decide to start a podcast about this whole issue? And what made you pull the trigger? Was there one thing that you said, you know what, it's time to do this thing?
Yeah, just the money I could see in UFOs, Matt. No, so
it's a get-rich-quick scheme. I see you're a fellow grifter as well. So no,
absolutely, yeah. I'm grifting my arse off in this cold shed. So the UFO thing, COVID, basically, around March 2020. I'll always say I could talk about podcasts all day and drive away your whole audience tonight, but we won't do that. I've been a fan of the podcast format since I was really young, and it first came out 15 years ago, I think. The first kind of podcast sprung up around about then. Ricky Gervais had one of the first big ones. I used to listen to a lot of radio growing up. As a really young child, I would listen to a lot of music on the radio. And then around 2000, 2001, I found talk radio stations in the UK. So this is still around the burgeoning days of the internet and getting AOL discs in the post. I started listening to kind of late night talk sport. They would go into political affairs. The Iraq war kicked off after 9/11, things like that. So I've always been a fan of radio. Podcasting for me is on-demand radio. That's what it is. So big fan of the format, and always had that thing of, I'd love to start a podcast one day. It seems like any old idiot can do it, so why couldn't I? But never decided to do it. And then around the first couple of weeks of COVID, as people started talking about this is getting bad, we might go into a lockdown, there was all those videos online in the UK of the army preparing for whatever it was going to be. I thought, do you know what? It was my birthday around that time, middle of March. And I bought a microphone with my birthday. And I thought, this is either going to sit in a box in my room, never be used, and I'll sell it in a month's time. Or if indeed we do have a couple of weeks coming up of free time, then this is the only time I'm ever going to start a podcast if I'm going to do it. So sure enough, the microphone sat in the box for about a month. And then as the lockdown was extended out and we realised we were going to have a little bit more time, I still worked. I wasn't furloughed. I've got a full-time job, the same one I had then I have now. I decided for a hobby, do you know what, let's give this a go. I remember the day I was driving down the street deciding, was it going to be football/soccer or UFOs? And I decided there's a lot of football podcasts, but not quite as many on UFOs. And I started reaching out to guests. Sadly, Nick Pope was one of the first people I emailed, who's just passed away, very well-known name. He gave me a very polite decline, but he at least replied. It was very much, he was really busy, and I didn't even have a name for the podcast at this point, just that I wanted to interview someone. So I thought, who have I seen on some documentaries, but they haven't had too much exposure? Someone, no offence, lower level. You know, if you want to start a soccer podcast, Matt, you want to speak to Ronaldo and Messi, don't you? But they're not coming on your first episode with no one listening. So you have to look for someone newer to the game, someone lower level. And I remember looking up Unidentified, the first series had been on, who were some of the guys in that who had maybe just came out for the first time. And I found Gary Voorhees.
Yeah.
And I remember looking on YouTube, and I think he'd done like 2 interviews. One of them, he was standing on a beach and it was kind of talking head format. The other was in Unidentified. So I reached out to him, and Gary really kindly said he would come on with no audience, no title. And sort of from there, it was Sean Cahill was episode 2, Jason Gleaves from the UK was episode 3, and then come episode 7, I managed to get Nick Pope on. No one should ever go back and listen to it because due to bandwidth issues on Nick's end, the audio is almost criminal to listen to. I swear they would play it in Guantanamo Bay to torture people.
Been there, yeah.
But it's a learning curve, especially in the early days. We all make a lot of mistakes with these things. But from there, it grew really quickly. And as COVID kind of subsided and we had that big explosion of podcasts early on, I just kept going with mine. And here we are, almost 6 years later to the day. Probably in a couple of weeks, it'll be 6 years. Like you say, almost 1,000 episodes. It's been fun. It's hard work. It is my main job essentially now. I still do work full time aside from it, but it's a really interesting subject, very close to my heart. Incredibly frustrating, incredibly interesting. There's so much to it. There's so many questions, and I think what's happened in the United States from 2017 to now, with the political progress, has been a real eye-opener. And it's people like yourself coming on, the shows are looking better, getting more professional, and someone like me sitting here in a shed with a tumble dryer behind this black curtain is just kind of along for the ride to throw in my 2 cents.
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, I mean, you can have a glitzy set and all that kind of stuff, but if you're not a good host and you don't have good guests, those are the 2 most important things in my book, and that's why I've always admired your work, because I love your interview style, as I said earlier, and you've always had great guests. Yeah, I was actually pretty late to this whole thing, and I'll tell you a story. My first big guest. I've never told this publicly. I went to the Soul Foundation, and I completely understand what you mean. It's very, you're not going to book President Obama on your first podcast. So I was at the Soul Foundation, and I got up at second talk or whatever that started that morning, and I get up to go to the men's room, and I'm going there doing my thing at the urinal, and I look over, and who walks up but Gary Nolan, Dr. Gary Nolan. So I start talking to him, and I just said, "Hey, would you like to come on my show?" Right in the men's room. And he's like, "Sure." I've never told anybody that story, but it's funny how those kinds of connections can sort of come about. I'm curious, who were some of your inspiration? You mentioned Nick Pope, but in terms of podcasters that were doing the UAP, UFO thing, were there any in particular that were inspirational to you?
I don't want to sound big-headed. I wouldn't say there was anyone inspirational. More ego to say, if people can do this, and I mean all genres of podcasting I would listen to. I listened to a lot of grassroots podcasts, people who had 50 downloads or a couple of hundred downloads a show, really low-level stuff that I really enjoyed. It's almost like finding a band before it gets popular when you like their early stuff, and I liked a lot of those kind of podcasts. But I used to listen to Ryan Sprague, still do. Ryan's a friend now. Somewhere in the Skies. I'd listen to Open Minds with Alejandro Rojas, Martin Willis, podcast UFO. I was just a guest on that the other night. Those were the kind of 3 main ones that I knew of. Aside from that, I would watch documentaries, or Unidentified had just came out a couple of years before. So yeah, those were the kind of UFO podcasts. I would listen to Neil deGrasse Tyson's Star Talk before he got really UFO bashy. and Brian Cox and Robin Ince, Infinite Monkey Cage, if anyone's aware of that in the US. I don't know how big it was over there. But yeah, so it was a case of I enjoyed those podcasts, and I think I had a little bit of that when I do an interview, and I'm sure people do this, Matt, with you, or when they're listening to me, that they would be like, oh, I wish you would ask this question, or do you know what, Matt, you should have asked this question. Why didn't you ask it in that 2.5 hour interview? You idiot, you missed that off. And I was that guy thinking, well, do you know what? Why don't I put my money where my mouth is, and I'll ask those questions? And I still have the notepads from the first shows, and I'm still a notepad and pen guy. Like I'm old school. As much as I've got all this wonderful technology around me now with PCs and Macs and stuff like that, I still like to do that. So I thought I could do this, and I jotted down a whole host of bullet points, and that's how it kicked off. And how I still kind of do it now. I don't think in 6 years, as much as the quality's got better, it sounds better, it looks better, as much as YouTube people have to see this face, that's an apologies for that, folks. It's still, I think, got the same kind of tone it had when it started, and I think that probably people who have been around since the beginning will appreciate that, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm curious, when you started this, did you have any idea that you would be where you are today in terms of one of the biggest UFO podcasts in the world? Did you see that coming at all?
One of the biggest UFO podcasts in the world is like being the nicest guy in prison, isn't it? I think
Sure, yeah.
It depends how that lands with you. And I'm sure Jesse Michaels, Chris Ramsey and others would say about that. But no, I didn't think, you couldn't imagine it would ever get popular. I remember day one, 2 people listened to the podcast on day one. One of them is me, checking the episode had gone out okay. And then I remember after like a couple of weeks, it was like 10 downloads and then 50 downloads. And after a month, I had like 2,000 downloads, which was, my wife thought was ridiculous. This stupid little hobby that I was doing was gaining traction. And then I remember, like, I don't mind, the numbers are all relative. And if anyone's out there starting their own show, and whether you get 10 downloads or 1 million downloads, great. You know, someone's choosing to listen to you. You should be happy with that. Success is relative. But I remember having like 80,000 downloads after the end of the first year and being like, wow, this is getting more popular. And reputation, I think, helped along with that for whatever reason. Sure. And I remember probably the big break for me was George Knapp coming on. That was one that a lot of people seemed to pick up. I mean, you could literally look at the graph of my numbers and see the George Knapp episode go like that. And people kind of stuck around, which was really nice. So I appreciate anyone's time who's ever given me time to come on the podcast. I've never paid for a guest. The only folks who ever asked for money were the Ancient Aliens crew. Some of those, no offence to them, I've been on that show, but I've never had to pay a guest. I've offered guests money. I've offered charitable donations. If someone, there are a few really high profile names I've not had on, but I've offered to make donations to servicemen and women in the United States and the UK, animal charities, all that kind of stuff, if they'll come on. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey along the 6 years. You see, I've had everyone. I've not had everyone yet. Chris Mellon's always said no to me in a very nice way. Tom DeLong's a bit of an elusive character for most of us. And Bob Lazar seems to now be on some podcasts, but mainly if you're out in California and a bit of a tech bro. But other than that, I've been very fortunate with the names who have chosen to come on. And some of the best interviews are with the names that aren't quite as big and popular. I think those can be some of the conversations folks really miss out on. But yeah, maybe similar to yourself.
Yeah, I completely agree. Okay, so you have this new book out that is just wonderful. It's a hardcover, Atlas of Unidentified Flying Objects and Unidentified Anomalous Phenomenon. So what made you decide to write a book? And this is your first book, correct?
Yes, it's the grift, Matt. It's the grift. You have to go with it.
Yeah, the big G word.
Yes, listen, I was never the guy.
There's so much money in it.
Oh, yeah, listen, do you know what? I'm not complaining about the money. The money was nice. I wasn't the guy who wanted to sit down and write a book because I wanted to do it. Far from it. After the Grush coming out and the congressional hearing where he talked about the non-human biologics, the craft, the pilots, I was contacted by a few radio stations. I've been very fortunate in the UK over the years to have like a reasonable reputation that BBC and other big stations like that will ask to speak to me about any UFO news. And with Grush coming out, I done like a 5-minute appearance one morning in a kind of big BBC station. I sat in the car outside my house in a really cold morning while my wife got the kids ready for school. And off the back of that, I got a text message from a producer for BBC 5 Live, and it was for a host, Nicky Campbell. He used to do Wheel of Fortune in the UK back in the day. And they were like, do you want to come on this afternoon? We're doing like an hour. It'll be a call-in, and you'll be one of the quote-unquote experts on the panel. And I said, yes, that was fine. I thought it was radio. It turns out it was radio and TV. So I had to go into my work and get an office. And during my lunch hour, I sat an iPhone on top of a bunch of boxes and folders and recorded an hour on TV. As glamorous it may have looked a setting, I was literally just recording on my iPhone. Off the back of that, a week later, a publisher reached out to me to say, are you Andy who does That UFO Podcast? Yes. Would you like to discuss an opportunity? I've been really fortunate to be asked to do lots of little things and big things over the time. I tend to listen to things people want to ask me, but I say no to a lot of things because I don't always think I'm the best guy or the right guy for it. If I don't think I've got anything to add, then I won't just say yes for the sake of money or a couple of minutes in the spotlight. It's genuinely not my style. So I listened to it, and they said they had this series, the Atlas of Vanishing Places, Paranormal Places, and they wanted to do a UFO series. And given how I'd spoken on radio, TV, and the podcast, would I be interested? And from there, it went well. They were very gracious in giving me multiple deadline extensions to the tune of about 6 months. Because it was taking me that long to do it. I had a really good team of people help me make it sound nice, make it look good. I think the book looks incredible. It's a proper hardback book. I would never have published something without that sort of help behind me. I don't think I could have. And hats off to people who do self-publish, especially a friend of mine, Graham Rendell, who I've got many of his books, historical books in the background behind me. He self-publishes and does a wonderful job. So yeah, the book came about through a publisher. It took me 18 months probably to write start to finish. And yeah, it's done pretty well since coming out, so I can't complain.
Yeah, it's really just a beautiful book. Like you said, it's hardcover, and I'll show some of the images here in a bit when we get into some of the cases that you're in particularly interested in. But so you've had thousands of hours of podcast interviews with these various people. In your mind, like what does the book bring that a podcast couldn't, or is it just a different form of media?
Both, because I think there's in 2026 especially, I've got 3 young children. I've got 2 full-time jobs. I've got a life, to live, and I don't always have time to read a book. So I was thinking, what type of book would I like to see on this topic? And I'm lucky to have all these wonderful books behind me written by all these different people covering so much of the UFO topic. But I was thinking, if Richard Dolan can write 3 novels on Roswell, for example, I'm not that guy. But what I can do is create a snapshot of a case, put it down in a couple of pages in a chapter, and give people a glimpse of the UFO topic, an updated glimpse at the UFO topic, especially since 2017, because I don't think we maybe had that since then. And think of those kind of classic coffee table books. When you go to a friend's house and they've got something sitting, whether it's in the toilet on a shelf, or it's in a bedroom, or it's on a coffee table, you pick it up, you can have a glance, you can skip to a certain section, read a little bit, and then put it down. You don't have to read it beginning to end. And it just piques your interest, and you can pick and choose what you want to read. I thought that's what I could deliver, that's what I could give, especially going into a bookshop, having all those options on a shelf, picking a really nice book off the shelf and being able to say UFOs, catchy cover, what are some of these cases that are well known, Roswell, Virginia, you have to put some of those in there. But then some of the lesser known cases that folks, even in the United States, wouldn't know. And the only remit I had from the publisher, they were really good letting me do what I kind of wanted with the book. But the big one was, we have to make it worldwide. There's 34 cases in the book. 17 are from the US, and I think 17 are from outside of the United States. I could have done an entire book just on the States. There are cases missing, such as the Phoenix Lights, which is my favourite. I purposely left that out. One, in case they wanted extra material, and two, in case they ever asked me to do a second volume of it. I could at least start with one case that I still know more about. So yeah, it's a mixed bag in terms of cases. Some really well known. It's split up into different sections as well. But that's what I thought I could provide. That perhaps long form podcasting, it's the TikTok of books. I think that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, I love that. Now, Diana Walsh Pasulka wrote the foreword. She, of course, is a religion professor at UNC Wilmington, author of American Cosmic. How did that come about? It's a really lovely introduction. I love anything that she writes, but that is really, I think, pretty special having her write the introduction for your book.
Yeah, Diana Pasulka and Richard Dolan has a piece on the back of the book praising it as well. And Diana was the first and only name I reached out to genuinely to write the introduction. The first person I thought of. She's one of the people I respect most. She's one of my favourite interviews to do for the podcast. And she's got such a unique angle, I think, again, to sell it to a mainstream publisher, to say it's not, I don't know, a crazy UFO person, and again, sorry to use that kind of terminology, but when you're speaking to members of the public and mainstream television, news broadcasting, print media, they're looking for, what is credible, and to be able to bring up Diana Pasulka's background and her religious history professorship and all that, someone with that level of knowledge and intellect, I think, sold it to them that was a good person to do that. And she was so nice to do that too. So yeah, really appreciate Diana. And then Richard Dolan writing the piece for it as well lends a lot of credibility, because those are folks that I really respect.
Absolutely. Now, of course, there are thousands of UFO cases out there. You picked 30. How did you decide what made the cut, what made it into this book?
I could make this sound really grandiose, but I remember I went to Cineworld one night to see a movie, and I can't remember what one it was, and I took a big folder with me and a notepad, and I sat for an hour before the movie with a coffee and wrote down all the cases I could think of off the top of my head, just like what comes to me instantly. And it was like, okay, well, here's all the US ones. Okay, this was in France, this was in Iran, this was China. And then starting to look through the internet and do, okay, any cases in Africa, any cases in Asia, any cases, and just start to pick out some lesser known ones as well. And that's literally how I done it, first off the top of my head. And then there was other cases, again, like the Phoenix Lights, where I was like, I could write about this one, but let's leave that to the side and try and focus again on some of the lesser known cases, because otherwise you're literally writing a book that, if it's a UFO audience buying it, they're going to have heard of all of these. So let's try and make it a little bit more interesting and a little bit more kind of internationally based, because I think like we all say, this is a worldwide phenomenon. As much as it's led by the United States, this happens all over, and I think the book illustrates that.
And all of these, or a lot of these folks, or maybe perhaps all of them, are people that you've interviewed. What was it like writing about these cases with people that you've actually interviewed on your show? I mean, I think that certainly had to have given you an incredible amount of insight versus perhaps someone that you had not met or interviewed.
I'm not a fan of listening back or watching myself back. It's hard enough doing this and having to see myself on the laptop, Matt. So I had a base knowledge from the guests I've had on the show, for example, Virginia, but I would use that kind of base level knowledge to go and watch. The typical process for one of the chapters would be, for example, Virginia, watch James Fox's documentary, read a couple of articles, and then watch some smaller documentaries or shorter episodes people have done with podcasts with James Fox, and then from that make a lot of notes and start to write a base out, and then kind of fill it in as I went along. Some of the cases were far easier. If it was something I had a real knowledge of or had spoken about multiple times, had heard people speaking about multiple times, Virginia, Roswell, that was fine. But then you've got some of the lesser known cases, Voronezh, China, Zhoushan, there was a lot less to go on. I think one of the cases are something like 1 or 2 little YouTube documentaries which give differing details and a couple of articles which are loosely translated from Chinese. So some of those were more difficult to write about. So maybe you got a couple of pages on a case, whereas others you could have written 50 pages on. So yeah, having the base level knowledge of speaking to many of these people through the podcast over the years. But I'll let you in on a secret, Matt. My memory is shit. Can I say shit?
I know
Is that
the
okay
feeling.
to say? Yeah.
Yeah.
My memory is awful. I may have written the book, but I've never read it back. Genuinely, I've not read the book. I don't plan on reading it, I don't think, because I wrote it. I kind of remember writing it. I loved it. So yeah, it's people will say to me, like, days, I record an episode and tend to get stuff out pretty quickly afterwards, and folks will comment on the Discord channel, which right now people are in there saying hello, they're watching this, so hi to them, or folks will email me something I've said and they'll be laughing or they'll ask a question. I don't remember saying it. So much of what I say or do is off the cuff. I think I probably wrote the book a lot more that way than people would realise. I'll say right now, if I can do a podcast and if I can write a book, sure as hell any of you out there can do it, and better than me. So never let that put you off. But yeah, it was interesting. And I think, like I said about early podcast episodes, if I ever wrote, and it's a big if I ever wrote another book, I've learned a lot doing the first one. Things I definitely would do, but things I definitely wouldn't do again.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we spoke beforehand about some of your favorite cases in this book, and so came up with 3 that you're interested in. So let's start with your first pick, Bass Strait. Walk us through that.
Yeah, so Bass Strait is an incident from Australia 1978. I've got some of the details down to my left here, folks. So, like I say, my memory's shocking. And we had a young pilot, 20-year-old Frederick Valentich, flying solo. He reports an unknown craft pacing him around 1,000 foot above him. What's really interesting with this, and it's in the book, if folks are on the YouTube, they can see it there. There's a transcript from himself and the radio control tower, and they're basically having a conversation over, I can see this object, blah, 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 blah. And you have the real-time radio of what happened. The plane disappears. At the end of it, he says, it's right above me. No confirmed wreckage was ever found. And it's a really interesting potential abduction story with live audio accompanying it, which I found fascinating.
Yeah, and again here, these are the pages from this particular thing, and and as I mentioned, one of the things I just absolutely love about it are the graphics. It's just a beautiful book. So
Matt,
so
just,
as you
just a quick side side note. I sent you the PDF, like an early version, so the stamps all over that one, for example, some of the pictures don't quite line up, or it's like a holding pattern. So if they do buy the book, you will see the actual picture and not, for example, those beautiful shiny rocks with Albany written all over it. So yeah, that was just the PDF that I sent, folks. So apologies for that one, Matt.
Yeah, no problem. So in this particular case, so the book included, as you mentioned, this air traffic control transcript, and one of his last words are chilling. What was there anything in that transcript that stood out to you?
The fact that you've got this young pilot who says it's not an aircraft, it's not a misidentification. Unless he really had no clue what he was looking at. But we're going back to the 70s. He's flying out solo. He can see this thing circling above him, long metallic object, green lights. He says it's moving at high speed, it's hovering, it's been stalking him, tracking him. And it's that to me, that it's not an aircraft. He knew he was looking at something that wasn't meant to be there, that he had not seen before. And it was the last time anyone saw or heard from him.
Yeah, which is just insane. Now, okay, so your next pick was about Tehran. Tell us about that one.
Tehran's quite a well-known case. So in 1976, Tehran, in the news right now for all kind of reasons, obviously. But multiple civilians reported bright objects over Tehran at night. The Iranian Air Force, as we now know, Tehran is now Iran, they scramble F-4 Phantom jets. I'll give a shout out to my friend here, Graham Rendell, who helped me with some of the detail, including the aircraft numbers and things like that through the book. Pilots locked onto objects. They tried to fire. Instrumentation failed. That's something we know famously can happen in so many of these cases. But it's just nice to have one of these incidents reported outside of the United States like this. Object reportedly, the larger object released smaller luminous objects. One appears to move towards the jet. It prompted an attempted missile lock, and the weapon systems failed at that exact moment, either by pure coincidence due to the technology or the object itself stopping the craft being able to fire upon it. Once the small object disappeared, the systems returned to normal. It was detailed in a US Defense Intelligence Agency memo. It was described and classified as highly credible. It did involve secondary aircraft, ground radar confirmation. So we've got here classic multiple witnesses, radar, military, and it's detailed, and there are multiple points of reference and data for this case, which makes it really interesting.
Yeah, it definitely is one of the more interesting cases for sure. And, as you mentioned, the DIA called this a classic case. How well known is this case, do you think?
It's talked about quite often. I know it's come up with some of the kind of higher level conversations when you hear military folks talking about cases that happen outside of the United States. So it's well known, it's well quoted. And again, I think to have that sort of region, that kind of level of, going to the point of firing upon an object is pretty extreme. So yeah, for me, it's one of the far more credible cases. Again, just a shame it goes back to 1976. Perhaps if the United States want to make friends with Iran, they could maybe ask for some of those files to be sent over. But I think right now they've probably got some more pressing things they're trying to do, like open up the Strait of Hormuz rather than open up the UFO files between countries.
Yeah, I think. Don't get me started on that whole thing, but yeah, I completely agree. Okay, your third pick, and I'm probably going to butcher the name here, Voronezh. Did I say that right?
I would say Voronezh, but okay, I imagine all kind of accents would say it in different ways. I'm not going to tell anyone how to speak, Matt. Listen to this accent. So yeah, this was again. I've tried to pick some different cases. We've had a potential abduction, one person sighting with not a lot of data. We've then had the Tehran with multiple data points, military, really interesting. This one goes to mostly primarily children, young children in a park in Voronezh, southern Russia. And they spotted large glowing spheres or discs, which not only landed, but then witnesses described tall beings emerging, one entity describing. And it goes a bit old school, classic alien type here with metallic suits, 3 eyes. I think a lot of these descriptions tended to fade away as time went on, didn't they? That kind of classic Orson Welles, Philip K. Dick science fiction look of an alien and what those were. Reports of beings interacting with the environment. There's talk that one of the beings shot a kid with some kind of ray gun and froze them in place. This is all documented. This is all, not to say that was real, but this is what people and witnesses reported when the military came to speak to them. There were impressions left on the ground from the craft. There were reports of elevated radiation levels. It was covered by Soviet state news at the time. Western media picked up on it, adding to its notoriety. And it's a rare example of a state, the USSR, acknowledging a UFO landing claim too, especially a pretty out there one with so many witnesses. The ray gun, it sounds like classic sci-fi, but again, just with the documentation and all the witness testimony, it wasn't just a couple of children, for example. This is a lot of folks in a busy spot. Really interesting, pretty strange, a bit more out there, but one I thought was definitely worth including.
Well, and I think that's interesting that TASS ran this story. Was this really kind of one of the first UFO stories that TASS, had run? Any idea why? And if so, any idea why they chose this one?
Yeah, I'm not too sure. Probably a better question for George Knapp, who we know smuggled many things out of Russia involving UFOs. But it's certainly the one that got the biggest coverage that I was managing to find anyway. But yeah, really interesting. Like you say, being covered by state news was massive. Especially 1989 was a tumultuous time for the Soviet nation, Soviet Union. We weren't too far from its collapse. So I'm not history buff, but I'm sure it wasn't the greatest of times for it.
And you connect this to the school sightings, as you mentioned, in Zimbabwe, Wales, and in Australia. I'm not too familiar with the Wales and Australia sort of connections. What are the similarities? Kind of what happened with those? The Zimbabwe one, I know, but the others are kind of new to me.
Again, Wales, they reported craft coming down low, landing. Westall, Australia, I don't believe the children reported a landed craft. I know it's the 60th anniversary just now. Grant Levac, Shane Ryan are doing a lot of promotion on that and discussing it. But for me, I just think there's something to when it's children reporting these things, especially large groups of children. There's a kind of innocence that comes along, and you could say naivety. But when you've got 10 or 15 children, 30 children, or something like Rua, Zimbabwe, 100 children reporting this incredible event, reporting beings, reporting craft, it just adds a certain interest or intrigue or a weight to what's being said. Because for them to make something up and all stick to the same story sounds really strange. But with this one, you had adults there as well, because they were monitoring, they were looking after their children in the park. So I think a lot of folks find themselves drawn to those cases where there are lots of children involved. Is there something to these craft or beings being drawn to kind of the younger generation? Are they implanting messages for the future? Like perhaps with Rua, Zimbabwe, that yes, the case may have happened 30 years ago, but does it happen then for the message to be spread now? That the documentary's coming out now, the book's coming out now, the fact that we now are all connected to social media allows the witnesses and the experiencers of that time to share their story to a world that's maybe more ready for that conversation than it would have been had we had the same capabilities 15, 20, 25 years ago. Sure.
That makes sense. Is there another case in the book that you want to make sure people know about? Another one that, maybe a fourth one that you think is important, impactful, other than the three that you've mentioned here?
I'm trying to remember them now. Like I say, my memory's shocking. I do like some of the kind of smaller cases. Like, for example, there's one in India where it's flight students who see an object, and that's got a few different radar points. There's an incident that happens in China with an airport being closed. Again, pretty short, lacking in data. I spoke to Richard Dolan recently around Chinese ufology and why the secrecy around that is so much more. I think that's a really intriguing place, because I think the US is such a wealth of information, both good and bad, on the UFO topic. It's certainly the go-to nation for any UFO stuff. Something I'm asked often about, and we might get to talk about the UK and UFO stuff, Matt, is why does this stuff always happen in the United States? Why is it always Bible Belt United States where all these folks are seeing these things? You know, a lot of stigmatization involved in it, but the US is the UFO hub for many different reasons. So yeah, I think some of those lesser stories that people can pick up and look at and go, this is happening all around the world. This is not a phenomenon that is stuck in the United States. That old 1990s trailer park, crazy yokel Cletus type Simpsons character, because those are the people that report UFOs. That's not true. Just because someone may have those circumstances doesn't make them any more or less credible. But you're getting such a breadth of society now reporting UFO sightings through the years, through the decades, especially as you'll know better than anyone, Matt, or as well as anyone, all these military folks, all these folks in US politics. This is a societal issue now, and that's starting to come out more and more, I think.
I totally agree. It's funny, I have people that are kind of new to the topic or are curious about the topic. It's almost inevitably, they say, well, why does this only happen in the US? And I always reply, well, that's not the case. Why do you think that there seems to be a perception that it is only a United States sort of phenomenon, which we clearly know it's not? Do you think it's how it's dealt with in the press, or maybe perhaps like, you do hear our government speak about it, although in kind of confusing terms. However, at least as far as I know, I've never heard anyone from the British government speak about it. What do you sort of attribute all that sort of misperception of that to?
In modern day, as we sit now, it's because of the progress happening in the United States. Some could say lack of progress, but the transparency, the governmental movement, the political movement is certainly happening in Congress at quite a mainstream level now. It's picked up in a lot of the main channels, the big podcasts, the main newspapers all talk about it. I think classically, things like Hollywood would have had a lot to do with it. All the big movies, the UFO events always happened in the States. I suppose from the 40s with Roswell all the way through to the 90s, all the cases people spoke about, the Phoenix Lights, Betty and Barney Hill, Calvin Parker, all these incidents happened in North America. So there wasn't a whole lot else to talk about outside. You'd maybe mention Rendlesham. That's all well known. But again, it happens on a US army base. Might be in the UK, but it's still US land technically at the time, with nuclear weapons, with US servicemen and women. So again, there's always that tag there. If you want to go into the why, perhaps it maybe is as simple as the US is such a large landmass that these objects would be drawn to it. Perhaps it's the fact that maybe there are bases located off various different coasts. I know that's something you've spoken about on your programme before, Matt. I've spoken about on mine. And this idea that, like the Tic Tac event where that happened, the West Coast, the East Coast, are there bases literally off of there where NHI drones are appearing, are made? You can get into all kind of weird and wonderful theories around it. But it may be something as simple as that. Again, it's a big place. It had to originate somewhere, or at least the lore and legend had to. And stemming from Roswell, the US government, the US military admitted they had a flying saucer for a couple of days. They changed the press release. It then went to a weather balloon. It's the father of the cover-up, or the grandfather of the cover-up. And it's led the way through the Five Eyes agreements these days. And I think it just is the case that the US were the early adopters of the cover-up. They're in charge of it. They've got the technology, the power, the means, and it's best that Australia, the UK, etc., allow the US to deal with these things. And we hear about it in Brazil with various different cases, Colares, the US involvement, Virginia, the US involvement. Whenever these things happen, unmarked uniforms, black helicopters turn up, and the folks involved in these collections and retrievals tend to have American accents when they speak.
Yeah. No, for sure. Do you, like, here in the U.S., we have lawmakers that are clearly, they know something's going on, some more than others, but you have people like Congressman, Tim Burchett, Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, Senator Gillibrand has worked on this topic. Do you see any new interest or increased interest with lawmakers in your government, the kind of waking up to the reality of this thing?
None. No, there's no interest politically on this. This is a career ender in the UK. If any politician came forward, and this is just my opinion, folks in the UK might be watching or listening to this now saying I'm wrong, I don't see that anyone could come out and discuss this in any serious form or fashion without ridicule, without them being laughed out of whatever House of Commons are speaking in. Our politics, Matt, is really boring and really dry. Maybe right now in the United States, some of you would yearn for a time of boring politics, given the show that goes on and has done for many years now in the United States. Our news networks are dull and boring compared to the States. The politics is dull and boring. The characters within it. Keir Starmer couldn't be any more of a dull, boring politician. And I'm not getting political. As just a person, he is... I'd rather watch paint dry than listen to him talk for an hour, honestly. Or another Stephen Greer documentary. Just having watched one of those recently that was particularly hard. So yeah, it's a very different setup in the States, and perhaps that lends itself more to the conversations around the UFO topic. But you've got to be fair to some of the folks leading the charge. They've picked it up, they've ran with it. And as we discuss this, Matt, I think we're 2 days away. The 14th of April, we're due this deadline, aren't we, for a release of up to 46 files, videos that we are hoping to have released. Whether that gets extended, because we are going to get some stuff, I imagine it will drop on the aliens or alien.gov domain that was purchased. Again, Matt, you're well connected. You might know better than me. I'm expecting some stuff to get uploaded onto there in the coming days, if not weeks. Do I think it's all going to be good? Nope. I think some of it will be just as frustrating or bloody, or could it be a balloon? Could it be a flock of birds? But I do think there will be some stuff on there that does generally raise eyebrows. And that's the stuff that I'll be focusing on. But yeah, the US leads the way with this, as it has so many things, for good or for bad. And I'm grateful for that in the minute.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of political circus, do you think that President Trump, our current president, will disclose? You're hearing people on the congressional side of things, in the legislative side here in the U.S. saying, "Oh yeah, he's going to do it." What's your take? And I know you're on the other side of the pond, but I think even more so, I'm really interested in your take, because you're a little bit more removed and you sort of see what happens, what's going on in the U.S. in terms of the political circus that we seem to be constantly living in.
I know so much more about the US political arena than I do the UK. I pay more attention to it because it seems to affect me a hell of a lot more. Do I think he'll disclose? Are we talking Epstein or UFOs? So if we're sticking with
not
UFOs,
Epstein.
Yeah, if we're sticking with UFOs, we'll leave the Epstein stuff to Melania. That was funny. If we're sticking with UFOs, he's had his opportunity. I mean, first time round, he had his sit-down conversations, didn't he, with his son at the time, that famous quote around, Roswell's really interesting. He's always had this line around, he said multiple times, I don't particularly believe, however, there's good pilots, men and women, folks in military uniform who have seen things, and but I don't particularly believe. He's always been very quick to say that. Then we had the drone incursions just before he came into office for the second time, where a lot of that campaign, and for parity here, to show I'm genuinely not political, I find it all hilarious, and that's all politics. The Biden administration were just dead silent on those drones and all that weird stuff that was happening. Trump very much campaigned on day one, I'm going to tell you what those were. What day are we on now? We're still waiting on that.
Yeah.
So he's had his opportunities. I think, like any good politician, if and when Trump gives us anything newsworthy in terms of anything close to a disclosure, it will be for personal and political and professional gain. So am I seeing that coming anytime soon? Not unless he has to, because he's had the opportunity. But then again, Donald Trump's the kind of guy who, on a whim, could drop a truth bomb on Truth Social, or, if someone just irks him on an Air Force One press junket, he can say what he likes, like he did with Obama a couple of months ago, that started this ball rolling a little bit. So, yeah, the opportunity's there. If anyone was going to say something, why not Donald Trump? But I don't know. What about you, Matt? What do you think?
I mean, I don't know. The guy's completely unpredictable. Part of me thinks, okay, he's got the whole Iran debacle, which is happening. Then, of course, he has the Epstein thing, which Melania went out in front of the cameras and said what she said. So when I'm thinking about it, like if I were a little bit nutty and I were Trump, I would be like, hey, what better way to distract from Iran and distract from Epstein than to dump the UFO files? Because I guarantee you, if he were to do that, well, maybe not Iran, and unfortunately, the whole Epstein thing is tragic. But I think that the media would absolutely focus on the UFO thing. But like you said, it's Trump. He could wake up in the morning and decide I'm going to bomb Iran. I mean, sorry, you already did that. But I don't know, man. It's I think it's anyone's guess at this point. But I do think that if there's a good chance of it happening, I think it's going to be Trump. I think my prediction is Republicans are going to get hammered in the midterms, and Trump is going to get impeached, and he'll be out, and it'll be JD. I'm hoping that JD would certainly do it. There certainly seems to be some kind of interest. What are your thoughts from where you sit across the pond as far as JD Vance and what he said on this topic?
The bits I know about JD Vance were a couple of years ago he hated Trump and said a lot of really derogatory things about him, and then
Yeah.
when the opportunity came a knocking to be number two, he jumped at that opportunity and changed his tune. Do you know what? He won't be the last person to do that. He's certainly not the first.
Right.
So, yeah, I think in terms of legacy, this is one I look at in terms of if you were a president and you get into office day one, you're probably already thinking about the end of your time, your end of your service, and what's your legacy going to be? Is it going to be a great healthcare program? That's one thing I find utterly incredible, the US health service. We're very lucky in the UK. People slate the NHS, but people get treated here for basically free. And I think it's crazy what you guys have to go through over there in terms of healthcare. But
I agree.
if you want to think of legacy, if you were the disclosure president, to quote Stephen Bassett, and I've probably summoned him by saying that now. I like Stephen, but it's the disclosure president. Then that would be a big one to go with. But as a world-changing road to go down, I think, is it a decision that one person can make? Perhaps not. And I think in the background, the people who truly run, and this isn't even conspiratorial, but you can't tell me a president runs the United States and that Putin runs Russia and that Xi Jinping runs China. There are people in the military background who are there for 30, 40, 50 years that you do not know their names. You barely ever see their faces. Those are the people making real decisions. And I wouldn't be shocked if those folks speak to each other pretty regular, especially on the subject of UFOs. And it's those folks that would have to come together to make some kind of massive statement. Short of whatever this phenomena is, or an aspect of this phenomena, Phoenix Lights 2026, massive craft over New York, Washington, whatever it may be. Then you'll get people shouting Project Bluebeam. You'll get folks saying hoax, hologram, all these kind of things. It would have to be something pretty unequivocal. But yeah, if you're looking in terms of legacy, why not be the UFO president?
I completely agree. I'm curious, in the UK, are there any well-known celebrities in your world that have come out with their personal UFO experience?
Well, Robbie Williams, I was a big fan of his in the late 90s, early 2000s, some absolutely classic albums. I know he's friends with Jeremy Corbell and others, and he's talked about an incident where he was with a woman and there was a shape-shifting happened in front of his eyes. Robbie Williams, wonderful artist, does have a history of drug abuse and alcohol abuse, which he has written about and talked about. So a lot of folks instantly jumped to that. It's not like it is in the United States. I think anyone in the UK that I would find credible is relatively standoffish on the UFO topic still. I'd like to think that perhaps Steven Spielberg's upcoming movie gets a lot of the influencers and celebrities out of the woodwork to view the UFO topic in a new light. And I think things like Hollywood and the mainstream can drive that. I would love to see in the UK, you've got 60 Minutes in the United States or some of these big news networks that cover the UFO topic. We would need a Channel 4 in the UK or a BBC to cover it at the top of the hour and make it a real serious piece and story. And we still don't get that. The closest we have had in the UK to major coverage of the US topic, and I'm going to go back 30 years, 40 years, maybe ever, was David Grush. Because for 4 or 5 days, I think the hearings were like a Tuesday or a Wednesday. And I think until at least that Friday, Grush was a story in the UK. maybe not mega mainstream, but I had a lot of broadsheet journalists, really serious journalists, who laugh and scoff at the UK, at the US and the UFO topic, contact me and other folks asking, like, they almost couldn't believe they were talking about it. But seeing Grush, seeing how well he spoke, the professional setting he spoke in, and the terms he was using, non-biologics, you know, craft pilots, they were like, there's something to this, isn't there? But it was gone by the weekend. So the door was kind of cracked open there, but we need something big to happen in the UK. And whether that's because the mainstream media gets controlled or told what to write and do, they control the narratives and they don't want that narrative out, the British public will largely go along with that.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that certainly is the case here. I mean, we have often spoken about how corrupt a lot of the mainstream media is here in the U.S. Now, I don't know if you heard, and I just, this popped into my mind, so I don't have the graphic to show, but Casey Musgraves, who is this country star, she posted a video from, I guess, a flight that she was going, coming out of Nashville or something like that, and she posts this video, and I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but Mick West actually replied to it. Have you seen this thing? Okay,
yep.
So Mick says here, the Casey Musgraves UFO sighting video has been identified by Flarkey, one of his sort of metabunk minions, as being 100% consistent with Starlink horizon flares. Her plane was in the flare zone for the entire flight, and the flares appeared in the right position, moving and fading at the same speed as seen on the video. If she could share, he always does this. If she could share the exact time the video was recorded, then we could identify the exact satellites. And did you see her reply to Mick's tweet?
Something about Bigfoot riding his mother.
Oh, yeah. You know, so, I'll just read it here for people that haven't seen it. It's on her X account, which is at Casey, capital K-A-C-E-Y, capital M, Musgraves. Hey, Mick, if you zoom your way into the videos, if you zoom way into the videos, you can also see a really clear angle of Bigfoot riding your mom. And I thought that was pretty comical, and I can't. It's not going to show up well on my cell phone, but Disclosure Memes put out this just wonderful image of Mick West's mom, who surprisingly looks a lot like Mick West. I encourage everybody to go have a look at that. That's at Fettuccine Split. Anyway, I thought that was interesting when we were talking about celebrities and what they have seen. And of course, there have been a number of U.S. celebrities that have come out, and you're hearing from Steven Spielberg that he indeed thinks that something is going on. Now, I want to kind of turn to maybe something at the opposite end, which of course is not funny, which is the loss of Nick Pope last week. He's never been on my show, or had never been on my show. I had the pleasure of meeting him just very briefly at Contact in the Desert. Tell our viewers a bit about him, what he was like as a human being. He certainly seemed like just a wonderful individual.
Yeah, so I got to meet Nick Pope just once at so here's a story for you, Matt. So I used to be a holiday rep. So I don't know if you get those in the United States, but in the UK, you would apply to work abroad in somewhere in Europe, and essentially tourists go on holiday, and you would work around the hotels and make sure their stay was comfortable, they had what they wanted, you liaised between them and the hotels. So I was out in Greece for 9 months back in 2009. And as the season kind of drew to a close, there were less tourists going about. You had a lot more spare time and free time. And in a bookshelf, I found one of Nick Pope's books, and I recognised the name. And there's Operation Lightning Strike and Operation Thunderchild, and I can't remember which one comes first. I think it might be Thunderchild. But anyway, I picked up the book and saw it was on UFOs. And I was like, oh, I'm going to kind of have a little flick through. And I really enjoyed it. And it was actually the second of the two books I read first. I took that book home with me, and it's behind that curtain on top of a tumble dryer still, okay? So when I came back, I bought the other book, or I think my wife bought it for me actually when we first met for a birthday or a Christmas. But anyway, so those are two fictional books by Nick Pope, sort of Independence Day-esque about alien invasion, UFOs, really enjoyable. So I got to meet Nick Pope then a couple of years later in 2013 or 2014 in Berwick in the UK. He was over visiting and put on an impromptu talk in Berwick Town Hall. Lovely gentleman, really nice guy. Obviously, sadly now passed away after a cancer diagnosis a few months ago and seemed to go downhill really quickly at the end, as often happens. I've just had a very close friend of mine pass away from stage 4 cancer just less than 2 weeks ago. No, that's shit happens. It's life. These things go on. Nick Pope, as a guy, was well known for coming forward in the 90s, having worked at the Ministry of Defence's UFO desk. Now, Nick Pope's now passed away. There are lots of different folks who will say lots of different things about what Nick Pope actually did, whether he embellished what his role was. The UK media labelled him the UK's Fox Mulder. Bear in mind, this was the mid-90s, late 90s. The X-Files was massive. Anything UFO related, and it still is quite often in the British tabloids, it's Fox Mulder and Scully, it's the X-Files logo whenever a UFO story comes out. There will have been tabloids that when Grush came forward will have ran the X-Files logo as part of the print. That's just what happens. But what we do know is Nick Pope worked in the UK's UFO desk. Whether that was people making reports, he would answer the phone, write them down and file them away, or if he was a bit more hands-on, highly debated, not for this conversation. Other folks can go and do that research themselves. But off the back of that, he became a go-to guy, not only in the UK, but in the United States for conferences. He helped consult on movie shows. He was typically British in that he wouldn't speculate too much about origins. He wouldn't go off on wild tangents in terms of the conversation. He kept things quite straight-laced and kept things relatively factual, to never kind of put too much emphasis on what he thought or believed. Heavily involved in the Calvine photo, famously having that essentially pinned to his wall. Lovely gentleman. I've never seen anyone have a bad word to say about him personally. And I think he's a big loss to the UFO topic in terms of what he brung, that gravitas, a credibility for many. He was a go-to guy for the media. And I think it speaks to maybe a larger time we're going to live through where so many names involved in the UFO topic from the 80s and 90s onwards, they are no longer as young as they once were. So there's a famous Doctor Who episode where they travel forward in time to the last star. And it's like we live in a time now of so many stars throughout the galaxy and the universe. And we're actually really fortunate to live in this time because one by one over infinity, these will die out. And I think we're in a place where we've got a lot of really great names across the UFO topic who are getting on in years, and there will be a time where names have to come up and replace those, where new work will be done, new revelations will come out. So I think Nick Pope's position and passing probably just reminds a lot of folks of not only their own mortality, but what we've got in this topic and how we use personality, how we use the kind of those backgrounds and try and be kind of good role models for anyone coming into the topic or having been involved in the topic for a long time, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree. He just sounded like a wonderful individual. I, as I mentioned, just had a sort of brief conversation with him, but I had never once heard a bad thing about him. And he certainly is a loss to the UFO community. If you have some time, we'll get to some audience questions here in a few. But I'm curious, in the thousands of conversations that you've had in the 6 years or so that you've been doing this, is there anything that you didn't believe when you started versus that you do believe now after having spent all of this time and talked to so many people?
I definitely think there is something to there being bases under the water off the coast of the US manufacturing something. I think a big swing in my thinking has been that a lot of these craft aren't manned, but they are not human. So, for example, the Tic Tac, I don't think there's anything inside of those Tic Tacs. I think those are empty. I think they're manufactured. They have all the classic hallmarks of a drone, but not a human drone. And I think a lot of what visits us, or perhaps is based here more long term, is unmanned NHI drones. That's not something I thought about too much or too often coming into not into the topic, because I've been into it since I was a kid. But I think maybe since 2020, I came into this with, have we got craft of alien origin visiting us on this planet? And I think I've had to change that word visiting to interacting with, living amongst. It's a multifaceted phenomena. There's so much involved in it. One thing that I came into the topic not being too keen on, and I'm definitely still not keen on, is when people tell you that they are in touch with beings from, name that star system, Palladian beings, and they contact them and they take them on their spaceships for a couple of days cruise around Alpha Centauri and bring them back. And yeah, not my bag. And I know other folks do like it. I've got listeners and viewers who are into that kind of stuff. But yeah, I look at some of these big conferences with 50 faces, and I'll know maybe 5 of them. And maybe that's my ignorance, I don't know. But when you've got, the crystal healing room off to this side, and, you can meet all these folks who know the Palladians over this side, not my particular area of expertise or interest in the UFO topic, but isn't that the wonderful world of ufology?
Yeah, you and I are, I think we're possibly brothers from another mother. I'm with you on that. So let's get to a few audience questions here. This is from 888 out there. There are the 2 nicest guys in the biz. Grateful they are serving us great news that the mainstream media refuses to. Thank you for that comment. This is from The Truth Is Up There. Both to Matt and Andy, you both joked about grifters in the subject area without naming anyone. To help us spot them, what makes a grifter in your eyes? That's a really great question.
I've got an answer for this that I'm really comfortable giving. When someone can't say, I don't know. If you have someone that is so certain that every single thing they say is correct, that everything that you say they don't agree with is wrong, and that it's their way or the highway, it's their narrative or no narrative, then for me that is a huge red flag. I'm not going to name names, but whether you're selling CE5 or whether you're doubling down on orbs that are actually the space station, then if you can't turn around and say, I don't know, I got that one wrong, then for me, that's an issue. And I think we see a lot of that.
Yeah, I do. And I'm usually not too shy about these things. I consider Dr. Stephen Greer in that boat. Essentially, it's like if anybody is going to say like, oh, this is not a threat, or this is all peace and love, or these things are from planet P and all of that kind of thing. It's like, dude, how do you know all of this? And to me, it's just my bullshit meter goes to 11. And the same thing. It's like if you're selling CE5 conferences or these humongous speaking fees, and I don't fault anyone for wanting to make a good living at this. People should be paid well for doing things that they enjoy doing. But I think that it crosses a line once you're kind of shoveling this that kind of stuff. So anyway, my 2 cents worth. From Tracy
Hut, Matt.
Please, go for it.
So I just watched the recent Stephen Greer documentary, and I will always say to folks, never listen to my opinion on anyone in this topic. Make up your own mind. I've shared my thoughts on Stephen Greer so many times. I believe he had good intentions, some good sources, some good knowledge. Whether that's still the case now, many decades later, I don't necessarily think so. His new documentary was an incredibly difficult watch for me because I actually forgot at the beginning. They've set it up as Stephen Greer takes a group of I'm guessing people who have paid him, but they don't mention that. But a group of folks attending his workshop to initiate CE5, contact NHI, and it's all about them. The documentary is meant to be focused on the group. You then see 90 minutes of Stephen Greer talking, and then at the end they bring the group back in. Now, I'm being a bit facetious. There are small snippets of individuals speaking, but it's a mix of Stephen Greer's opinion and some Stephen Greer stand-up, because he puts in so many quips, which are actually, some of them are quite funny and cutting. But I forgot it was about the group until the end, when they bring it back in with the monologue around the group and the journey they've been on. And it really just brought it home to me. This is all about him. And this isn't about what he's trying to do or convey. And if people there get something out of it, wonderful. If your thing is standing in front of a 65-inch TV and being told what you're looking at is A, when actually it's probably something else, like B, then that's absolutely fine, and that's your right. Much like I've got that book, you don't have to buy it. It's optional, I promise you. Appreciate if you do. But for me, it's just something out there for people. But I'm not going to tell you it's something it's not. It's not giving you the answers. It's not giving you the definitive guide on UFOs. It isn't that. It's just one guy's opinion on 34 cases. That's it. And I'm not going to tell anyone who reads it and tells me it's crap or shit or lacks depth or anything like that they're wrong, because that's their opinion and they're entitled to it. And I think there should be more of that in the UFO topic. And yeah, if anyone wants to watch that Stephen Greer documentary and get in touch with me and tell me they like it, I'd love to hear the reasons why.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. It's like, I have no idea what any of this stuff is. I couldn't tell you. I'm not going to even venture to guess. I mean, I've experienced this stuff quite a few times, and I have no better opinion or whatever it could be. Who knows? I have a very interesting theory about Stephen Greer. Do you want to hear it?
Go for it.
My theory is that he was probably a medical officer in the UAP Deep Legacy program, and then at some point bailed out. He probably, I don't know, maybe he got screwed or whatever, and he has a bunch of stuff that they won't mess with him on, and that's why they seem to leave him alone. It's just my personal theory. I have no idea. For what it's worth. Okay, so from Tracy Hutchings 9671, it's nice to see Andy on the other side of the microphone. That UFO podcast is one of my favorites. Thanks, Matt and Andy. All right.
Thank you, Tracy.
Okay, great. And same here. All right, Mistletoe 4961. Love Andy's pod. Everyone should catch and subscribe. So how can folks find your show?
They can find it on any podcasting platform, on YouTube, on X, on anything. If they just type in That UFO Podcast, it's got a website, thatufopodcast.com. And if they really like it, there's YouTube and Patreon memberships and Apple free trials. But the content goes out. Almost all of it's free. Anything that isn't free is sort of opinion pieces or bonus shows and content, stuff like that. But like you say, I've done nearly 1,000 shows. I'm a dad of 3 little kids. My wife puts up with me doing this kind of hobby that turned into a full-time job. I put a lot of time and effort into it, and I hope people enjoy it, much like you do, Matt, as well. And all I want to do is offer my opinion, my thoughts, and platform folks to share their opinion, thoughts, and work that allow people to make informed decisions, whether they like what I say, whether they like what the guests say, or they don't. And I think that just kind of helps us all make better decisions moving forward.
With you on that. Okay, this is from The Truth Is Up There. Question: could the UAP movement benefit from a Comic-Con level of events, touring cities annually with podcasters, hosting panels with the likes of Nolan, Pasolka, and Strieber?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of get it though, don't we? And I think this is one of the issues with the UAP topic or community now. I mean, back in 2021, it was really quite united, and that includes the social media presence as well. And there was a lot of folks involved doing some really good work who maybe don't do that anymore for various different reasons. I mean, even back in the day, Stephen Greenstreet was one of the people championing the topic along with Nick Pope, believe it or not. And I think now it's so much more, it's almost more compartmentalized that we keep hearing everyone talk about. It was like you had most folks behind Lou Elizondo, and then other folks came forward. And now everyone seems so splintered and off in little groups and militias, and people don't trust each other, and it's a much more fractured place, and that kind of goes across the board. Everyone's got their own piece of the pie, and people are a lot more wary of putting themselves into groups and cliques, and you get them. And I had Darcy Weir on not long ago talking about his book, the Cosmic Con, his documentary, The Cosmic Con.
He's great.
And you see some of these, I won't name conferences, right, and it's no offence to them, these people sitting at tables giving themselves awards every year for best this or best that, and it's like, for fuck's sake, again, sorry folks, but the Scottish in me comes out sometimes. I just don't have a lot of time for that kind of stuff, that kind of self-aggrandising, pats on the back, well done us for being, you know, in the US, and maybe it's a US thing, folks, apologies, right, I'm going to take a beating here probably, but you know when you called something the World Series, or that they are the world champions, yet only folks in the US can enter? Like, what's the point in that? And it seems like there's UFO groups that do the same, where there's like a championing of themselves, and they're protecting whatever money they bring in. My Stephen Greer thoughts, he had a lot of good opinions, a lot of good ideas, and over the years, as the money came in and he realised he could really make good for himself, more power to him, he went with it. And that's why he now shares pictures of the back of chairs and claims they're aliens that only talk to him and no one else. Remember that, folks. So yeah, I think there could be a place. I like that Comic Con style idea, but I think you would have to get a truly good mix of people across that, and I don't know if all those people would allow their egos to do that and be vulnerable. Matt, I've got ideas for shows. I'm sure you'd be the same. I would love to host. Let me just pick some names out of hat. Lou Elizondo, Stephen Greer, Danny Sheehan, Richard Dolan, and George Knapp, right? Give me the 5 of those live for 3 hours on a podcast and let me direct questions at them and for each other. Would any of those do that? Maybe some of them, but I tell you, I know some of them that definitely wouldn't. And I think and that's not to benefit me, put them on Rogan, right? Do that, put them on Joe Rogan. They won't do that. And I think there's folks in this arena that wouldn't talk to each other because they very quickly get found out.
Yeah. The whole sort of self-aggrandizing thing and giving people awards, I don't know. And where I come from, we call that a circle jerk. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. All right. Now, this question I really debated whether I wanted to ask you on air. It's probably going to put you in a really difficult spot, but you know, hey, it's my job to ask difficult questions.
What is that guy saying?
Well, no. Well, okay. So, and if you want to pass on this, I understand, and I hope this doesn't put you in an awkward spot. Okay. This is from Dub Snapper 4787. Here it goes. And again, pass on it if you want. Will Andy ever support Celtic rather than Rangers?
Absolute ridiculous question. No, I certainly will not. I'm a Rangers supporter. That's my football club. That's my team. Celtic are not a nice club. Delusional fan base. Thanks to all those who sign up to my Patreon who are Celtic fans and regularly remind me of it when Rangers don't win. But right now things aren't too bad, and we've got a sugar daddy from the United States funding us currently. So thank you, Andrew Kavanagh and his multi-billion-dollar empire. So yeah, no, I will never be a Celtic fan. Yeah, leave that one there.
All right, there you go. Okay, Louise Walsianka 7293. Do you cover Rendlesham in your book, Andy? I think you spoke about this, I believe, but I don't recall your answer.
Oh, that's a great question. I'm really fond of that question. Off the top of my head, having to look through the book, I think the answer is yes, I do, in chapter 14. So yeah, I was thinking that one of those that I didn't include, but I did. Yes, so Rendlesham is in there. I was really fortunate I'd done a series called Encounters, which was not me in the podcast. It was with another podcast company. And myself and another host went through over 6 or 8 episodes, the Rendlesham Forest story. And we had various folks. Was Nick Pope a part of that? he might have been, and I didn't interview him for it, but Charles Halt was. We interviewed Charles Halt, and there's a lot of great audio from him on that story. Cover Rendlesham, really interesting story. A lot of misinformation over the years. I think a lot of folks have tried to make money and make a name off of that, still to this day. But fascinating case. Something definitely happened there. Something more than likely, I believe, is extraterrestrial, and it's linked to the fact there was nuclear weapons on that base.
Got it. Okay, we on the show here, when we do live shows, we're very fortunate to have moderators that kind of keep things together in the chat and vet questions and whatnot. And this is from one of our moderators, Dwayne. I wouldn't mind getting Andy's take on Jim Lakatsky's latest statement on weaponized of someone lying to Congress. If you basically, he's saying that I think Lakatsky said that if they're part of a SAP or whatever, that they can lie to Congress if they choose to. I think that's what he means by that. Curious if you have any thoughts about that, or Jim Lakatsky in general.
For a start, I don't believe just because someone says they are doing it under oath that makes any difference. I think when you talk about things like legacy UAP programs or high-level cases of people being unalived, drugs, Epstein, people will lie regardless of being under oath or not. That makes no difference. I don't think. I know Lakatsky has hinted. I know a lot of folks online have said he's talking about Elizondo. I know some folks have said he was talking about Schellenberger when he was presenting the Immaculate Constellation stuff that I know Jeremy Corbell was thrilled about. So I'm guessing one of those two, or he's hinting at Grush. So I'm guessing it's one of those three. Lakatsky's a funny character because he's been very coy. I was close to getting him on my podcast, but it never happened. Through someone, basically. He keeps himself very much through weaponized, and I get that. He's comfortable with George. And George Knapp's one of the best people to ask these questions, to be fair. So do I think people have sat, if I answer it more broadly, do I think people have sat and lied in front of Congress in these hearings? Yes. Brain Moultrie certainly did. Yeah,
Big Daddy Ronald Moultrie is what I like to call him. Okay, well, awesome. Well, thank you for being here. Of course, the book is, once again, holding it up here, in just a beautiful book. This is definitely coffee table material, just really fantastic. Atlas of Unidentified Flying Objects and Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena. How can people find this lovely book, purchase this book?
It's on all kinds of websites, including Barnes & Noble, some really ethical selling companies. I know some folks are against Amazon, but Amazon's the easiest place to get it. If they buy it, please leave a review. If you've bought it already, leave a review. It's available on Kindle, and it's on audiobooks soon, which I will be reading. Believe it or not, yes, I am reading with this accent an audiobook. And even if you don't read it, folks, great coffee table book. If your coffee table has one of those wobbly legs, you can put the book under it and it'll kind of steady it out. It's pretty sturdy. If any intruders break into your home, smack them over the head with it, it'll do some damage. So yeah, it's multi-purpose, multi-use book. It's like the original iPad with infinity battery life. So yeah, go pick it up.
Awesome. I highly recommend it. And of course, your show, That UFO Podcast, I imagine everyone can find that on their favorite podcasting platform, correct?
Yeah, their favourites or the ones they hate, they all host it, one and the same. So yeah, thank you if they drop it a follow.
Awesome. Well, Andy, thank you so much for joining us. This has really been just fantastic. Huge fan of your work, huge fan of this book. I encourage everyone to certainly subscribe to your show, support your show, and buy this book. You know, what a great way to open up the conversation when you have friends and family over at your home, than to have this sitting on the coffee table and people can go through it and have a educated conversation about this topic. So very much appreciate that.
Awesome. And people can get signed copies of it if they just contact me directly. You just have to pay the postage, but yeah. So there's that final plug to grift away.
Yep. All right, we'll end it on that grifting note. All right, well, next time I see you, I'm sure you're going to be living on some massive island with all of the money that you've made off of this book, and I certainly hope you'll pay for my airfare to come over there.
Can I just say, not Epstein's Island? I am not affiliated
not
with Jeffrey Epstein.
Not going there yet.
And I was not there. I was not on that island, but some other nondescript island that does not have lots of young children other than my own. So I just have to get that out there. If Melania can do it, so can I.
Yeah, there you go. Awesome. Well, Andy, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Matt.
Okay, cool. All right, great. Fantastic. All right. So anyway, I just love his work, and I think one of the things that I love about Andy is he is just a very genuine, humble guy who's just doing a really great job at this topic. And then also I want to say too, for those of you that have been watching the show, we really appreciate it. If you're not subscribed, please hit that button, ring the bell, leave a comment, give us a thumbs up. I know all that sounds like a bunch of baloney, but here's why it matters. YouTube sees all of that and basically says to itself, hey, maybe we should recommend the Good Trouble Show to people who do not know it exists. And that's how all of that works. And of course, you can find us on all of your favorite podcasting platforms if you'd like to listen to us on the go. And last thing, and I promise, we have no sponsors on this show, zero. We are completely kept alive entirely by people like you who are watching. So if you want to help us pay the studio rent here in LA, Super Chats are always open. I think you can always donate via Super Chat even after the show is done. And we are also on Patreon at www.patreon.com/The Good Trouble Show. And and like I said, you can support us with the Super Chats. And anyway, just a couple of thoughts. And a bit unprepared today. We had some technical issues right up until we were about to air. So I didn't really have kind of the normal amount of time that I have to prep on this kind of stuff. Sort of my extemporaneous thoughts. A couple of things regarding Trump revealing anything on this. I certainly hope that is the case. I think that we are very fortunate to have members of Congress such as Anna Paulina Luna, who I had the pleasure of meeting personally backstage at Real Time with Bill Maher, and had a very extensive conversation with some members of her staff regarding AARO, the Pentagon's UFO office, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. And essentially I was making the case that AARO needed to be defunded. They are not who they say they are. They cannot be trusted. I think that you're going to see some signs of collusion, if that's the right word, between Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick and the current AARO leadership. I've mentioned on the show that I received an invitation to apply for a job from their recruiter. There actually wasn't their recruiter; it's their new contractor that runs everything. AARO is no longer run by I'm blanking on the name. That's what I get for trying to do this on the fly here. They are now run by a contractor called Arlo Solutions. It is no longer the previous contractor, Sandcorp. That's what it is. Sandcorp lost the job. AARO basically fired them, and it is now run by Arlo Solutions, who, and we're going to do an episode about that coming up pretty soon. Arlo actually does the meat of the work, it appears, at AARO, and it was Arlo Solutions that reached out to me via LinkedIn and said, hey, we think you would be a good fit for this job. And of course, part of the desired job qualifications was they wanted me to have a background in information operations, information activities, and deception activities, which is essentially propaganda, and that's what they were looking for. And as I understand it, they actually reached out to another podcaster, I don't know who that is, but made a similar sort of, hey, we would love for you to apply to AARO, which of course I declined. I'm not, if anyone knows me, I speak the truth. I speak truth to power. I really don't give a fuck what the powers that be think, be it at the Pentagon, CIA, or whatever. Fuck them, as Ross Coulthart says. So the last thing I'm going to go do is work for the Pentagon. This show, I'm pretty much working for free and have the whole time. We barely are able to pay our rent here at the studio. So even if they offered me $1 bajillion to go work for the Pentagon, there's no effing way that I would ever do that. Because at the end of the day, we don't need any more people lying to the public about what is going on. And we know that that is what the government, that is what the Pentagon, that is what the CIA, that is what the National Security Council has done, is continually lie to the American public about what is going on with the UFO, UAP issue, as well as lying to Congress. And again, my hat is off to Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna. She's a Republican. I'm a Democrat. But you know what? I have such immense respect for her. We may not agree on every issue, being on different sides of the aisle. But you know what? We need more members of Congress like Congresswoman Luna. She is not afraid to call it like it is. She's not afraid to call out the corruption that exists on both sides of the aisle, Republican and Democrat. This woman, she's brilliant. She is, I think many people, or some people underestimate her. She is a brilliant lawmaker, a brilliant mind, a very strategic thinker. Her staff, they are absolutely wonderful. And if we didn't have people like Anna Paulina Luna out there pushing the Trump administration to move on this and understand, she's got to be careful politically for herself. She can't push the Trump administration so much so that she catches heat from the president. So she's really walking a tightrope. And I think she's done so in just a very brilliant manner. And again, we are very lucky to have members of Congress like Anna Paulina Luna. We need more people like her in Congress. There are far too many that are afraid to speak the truth, are afraid to hold their administration on their side of the aisle, that are afraid to hold their president's feet to the fire. And I think that she certainly has done that in a very careful, strategic way. But yeah, I just think that she's fantastic. Of course, we have other members of Congress that are doing really great work, such as Congressman Eric Burleson, Congressman Tim Burchett. I love Tim Burchett. I've tried to get him on the show and have not had any luck with that. But what I would say to Congressman Burchett, if you are watching the show, and again, I would love to have you on as my guest. I have a huge amount of respect for you as well, is I know that you put forth this legislation to defund Arrow, which Anna Paulina Luna called for. I'll just say that my conversation had its intended effect with her staff. But what I would say to Congressman Tim Burchett, firstly, thank you for your advocacy and your fearlessness on this topic. You've got balls of steel, my friend, and I really do respect that. But I don't have the legislation in front of me, but as I understand it, what Congressman Burchett is wanting to do is decentralize, get rid of Arrow, but as I understand it, have it exist in multiple places under the Department of War or the Pentagon. And I know this legislation is very well-meaning, and much as Congressman Luna and Congresswoman Luna and Burleson, we are wildly grateful as a nation to have lawmakers such as all of you that are advocating for this. But what I would say to Congressman Burchett, I hope you will reconsider this, is to put this problem set back under the purview or to keep it within the purview of the Pentagon, I think is a really, really big mistake. I say this out with all due respect to you, Congressman Burchett. This problem, the UAP problem set, needs to be removed completely from the Pentagon and placed under the Department of Homeland Security. And for a couple of reasons. Number one, we know that the Department of War, and it doesn't matter if it's a Democrat in office or Republican in office, it doesn't matter. It's the deep state, the deep staters that have existed in the Pentagon, these guys, women and men that sit in there for 20 years, their entire career. Those are the folks in the Pentagon that are responsible for really kind of where we're at. They are responsible for the disinformation. They are responsible for the lying to Congress. They are responsible for this continuous shell game of how they are hiding it from all of you in Congress. And Anna Paulina Luna, she has spoken publicly about how Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick has lied under oath to members of Congress. So Congressman Burchett, I really would encourage you to not keep it in the Pentagon. I agree, we've got to get rid of Arrow. It's a gigantic waste of money. I'll be doing an episode on that soon. It's a gigantic waste of money, but Congressman Burchett, to keep it in the Pentagon, even if you disperse it under different areas, it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be more of the same bullshit, more of the same lying to all of you in Congress, all these folks in the Pentagon laughing at all of you in Congress behind your backs. That's just the way it is. And the second thing I would say is legally, the UAP problem set is supposed to be under the Department of Homeland Security. DHS has the legal authority over this issue. If I did some research on this, the land mass in the continental United States that is under Pentagon control is something like, I think it was 1.4%. So 1.4% of the entire land mass of the continental United States, the United States of America, is under Pentagon control. The military bases, missile silos and whatnot. The rest of it, where all of this UAP stuff is happening, the Department of Homeland Security is responsible for all of that. They are responsible for the defense, the oversight, the defense of critical infrastructure of the United States, airports, water treatment plants, nuclear facilities, you name it, that is under the DHS purview. So Congressman Burchett, I would encourage you to revise this legislation and make the case, which your staff will easily find the laws that will support exactly what I'm telling you right now. Legislation that specifically puts the UAP problem set under the Department of Homeland Security. That's where it belongs. It needs to be removed from the Pentagon, from the Department of War. To whatever extent it can, be removed from the Central Intelligence Agency, who is the major stakeholder in this whole thing. It needs to be given to DHS. Yes, get rid of Arrow. Arrow's a shit show. They're wasting taxpayer monies like you wouldn't believe. It is a disinformation operation. Arrow is meant to make all of these congressional hearings go away. Arrow is there to try and make all of you in Congress look like fools for examining and holding hearings on all this stuff. You got to get it away from the Pentagon. They are going to lie to you on a continual basis. They're going to continue to lie to the American public so long as the UAP problem set is under the Pentagon. Congressman Burchett, Burleson, Luna, you got to get it out of the Pentagon. You got to stick it in DHS. That's where it legally is supposed to be. That is what the federal law states in terms of the domains that DHS has oversight of. So Burchett, man, brother, I love what you're doing. We are lucky to have lawmakers such as yourself, Luna and Burleson. But with all due respect, sir, the legislation needs to be changed such that the UAP problem set is taken out of the Pentagon and put under DHS. So that's enough of that. Finally, I asked Andy this question earlier, and I think the question, I have to look at my notes, but it essentially was, is there anything that you didn't believe when you first got into this topic that after Andy has been at this 6 years and done all of these wonderful shows that now he believes? And and he basically spoke about the Tic Tac possibly being a drone type thing, if you want to call it that, some kind of autonomously or intelligently controlled vehicle without having any kind of living entity inside of it, which I thought was a really fascinating point. I think he brought up some really great points there. For me, my personal journey in this certainly has been the shock of seeing UAP over 20 times. I've never seen a solid craft. It's always been an orb that has been above my home, but having experienced that, certainly experiencing the kind of paranormal stuff that came along with it, which I had no idea about, all of that, for me personally, has been exciting, disturbing, all of that. But I think for me, the one thing that has disturbed me probably the most out of all of this, and I think I've been doing this only 3 years now, is the really bad things that the United States government and in particular some defense contractors have done to American citizens, to men and women that have worn the uniform, that have dared to speak up about this. I encourage all of you to go and look at the episode of Weaponized. I think it was Dylan Borland that spoke about some of the just absolutely criminal things that were done to him that very easily could have taken his life. I think as well. Again, I'm on the left side of the aisle. I used to think that everything Trump said was a bunch of bullshit until I found out that there is a decent amount that he has said that is not bullshit. And one of those things is this deep state thing. It is true. What this machine of unelected bureaucrats that exists consistently from administration to administration, these lifers, these deputy assistants of or deputy of, all of those folks that are a part of this deep state machine. And when I say deep state, I'm not trying to color it in a Trump way or a Republican way, because this deep state thing is regardless of party. It doesn't care who is in office, doesn't care if it's Republican or Democrat. This machine is there to control this entire narrative, and it's also there to retaliate against whistleblowers, against contractors, engineers, people that were working for defense contractors that are involved in these waived, unacknowledged special access programs. This machine is there to do some really horrible things to people. There's a lot that I do on this topic, a great percentage of what I do that all of you at home are not privy to. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff that I've been involved with for quite some time that I don't publicly speak about and I will not speak about. And I have relationships with many people in and out of the Department of Defense and the intelligence community, current and former folks. And when you get to know these people on a personal level over many years, and you hear firsthand details of things that have been done to these individuals that the public is not aware of. They may be aware of that they've been harassed or things like that, but they don't know the gritty details of what has been done to destroy their lives, destroy their marriages, destroy them financially, to either kill them or certainly endanger their lives, or to try and mentally affect them. It's horrible stuff. And I'll be honest with you, there are a lot of times that I say to myself, I wish I didn't know what I know. Because I think for me, it has made me very, very sad about what is going on in the world, and certainly what is going on in the United States of America. And so when you have people like John Greenwald, who I made a comment a while back on the show that if something ever happens to me, it wasn't suicide, it wasn't a petty crime, it wasn't a crash or a mechanical failure, it wasn't drugs, it wasn't alcohol. I don't do any of that. John Greenwald went and basically poked fun of it, and had some kind of asinine comment that John Greenwald usually has anyway. But here's the truth of the matter, and this is where I don't trust John Greenwald, and I personally think he is some kind of shill for the Deep Legacy program, is my personal opinion. I don't think John Greenwald is who he says he is. Knowing firsthand and hearing the pain, and knowing firsthand what has happened to people's health, what has happened to people's marriages, that were all a function of the retaliation from this deep state, from these contractors, it's disturbing and it's sad. And when I hear someone like John Greenwald from the Black Vault, or Douglas Dean Johnson, or others who go in and make light of it or belittle the people that have had that kind of retaliation, it's sad, and it really makes you wonder why people like John Greenwald do that, or others. Why they seem to put a lot of effort into discrediting whistleblowers, and more importantly, discrediting concerns that whistleblowers publicly talk about. It really makes you wonder who they're working for. And remember, part of people that are working in intelligence, they'll tell you 50% that is true, maybe 75% that is true, that will help buttress their credibility. But then the 25% that they're putting out is intentional disinformation, or part of some kind of intelligence operation, or whatever. And all I got to say is, the conversations that I have had with people who have lost their spouses because the Air Force Office of Special Investigation went in and specifically targeted their wives, and through whatever means talked their wives into leaving their spouses. The stories, I won't say stories because they're not stories, when I'm told about legacy program security contractors, namely Wackenhut and the Pinkerton Group, who are now two totally different, renamed something else, when they're going into the homes of whistleblowers and rooting around in their attics, when they're placing tracking devices on their spouses' cars, when these engineers and whatnot are receiving that kind of harassment as kind of a message that you better shut the fuck up? All I got to say to people like John Greenwald is you can fuck right off. Because when people like Greenwald go out there and say, put out some bullshit post, I can't believe Matt Ford is saying this, or whatever about, me feeling that I need to publicly state that if something happens to me, that it wasn't what you think it is, or what the police might say it is, or whatnot. I'm one of many. I've been harassed once by the intelligence community in Vegas at the Waldorf Astoria. I had that happen one time, and it scared the shit out of me. But what I've experienced is nothing compared to what these whistleblowers and engineers and others have experienced. Nothing. So when you have people like John Greenwald going out there and trying to throw cold water on it, he can fuck right off. And I mean that in every sense of the word, because it's a slap in the face to the men and women who have done way more for disclosure than John Greenwald in his Black Vault thing. Way more. They have sacrificed way more for this country and this democracy than John Greenwald will ever do in the entirety of his life. And again, it's not just Greenwald. You're hearing this from Sean Kirkpatrick. You're hearing this from Tim Phillips. You've heard this from Dean Johnson, this concerted effort to do anything to discredit certain whistleblowers. They're not just talking out of the side of their mouth. It is intentional. So when you have people posting on X that anybody going on and saying publicly, hey, if something happens to me, it's not, I didn't kill myself, it wasn't alcohol, it wasn't drugs, it wasn't a petty robbery, none of that stuff. When they go out there and they're trying to throw cold water on that, they can fuck right off. Because I know firsthand from deep personal relationships with these individuals who have had just about everything taken from them. Their spouses, their retirements, their careers, their security clearances, people cutting their brake lines, putting tracking devices on their cars and their spouses' cars. So when John Greenwald goes out there and makes fun of it, he can fuck right off. It's bullshit. And it is a slap in the face to any man or woman who has tried to do the right thing for this country. People getting microwaved with Havana syndrome because all of a sudden they're on the radar, and even not publicly on the radar, but they're on the radar of these defense contractors, of these defense contractors and their security contractors. And then they end up getting microwaved, and they end up having leukemia or other physical ailments. This kind of stuff, folks, is real. This isn't some fantasy thing. This isn't some bullshit world that John Greenwald and others live in. This is happening, and people are getting hurt. We're already hearing about circumstances revolving around scientists and engineers and former people in the from the military that are all of a sudden disappearing. You have General McCaslin. There's a whole host of people. Something is going on. I don't know what it is, but it is not good. It is not. It's not by chance. At this point, I certainly don't believe in any coincidences. But what is happening with these people that are former Air Force engineers, for defense contractors or for the FFRDCs, the federally funded research and development centers. I read just the other day another individual who worked for a contractor that built or builds the majority of many of the components used in our nuclear weapons. Disappeared. He walked out of the house with nothing but his handgun, and he's gone. This is happening. You have people like Amy Estridge, who was a scientist and engineer in Huntsville, Alabama, who, by the evidence I have seen, did not commit suicide. She was murdered. Someone who was being continually harassed by private contractors in the United States for something like 5 years. And she lost her life. She was working on this whole anti-gravitic thing. And I have seen evidence related to this that the public has not seen. And it is, it's disturbing. And it makes you realize that when you have people that speak up, scientists that work on anti-gravity or a whole host of things that the Northrop Grummans of the world and the deep state and the legacy program do not want out. When you have people like that are fearless, like Amy Estridge was, who were brilliant minds and had the scientific background and knowledge to create these things. These contractors, the Deep Legacy program, that's a threat to them. It's a threat to their revenue. That is a threat to their livelihood. That is a threat to their place in the power structure. And when you have someone like her, that if you go and you watch some of her live stream interviews, she did one with her boyfriend. I want you to listen to the people that she talks about and the work she was doing. And when you listen to it, it is crystal clear she was going to be a threat to a lot of people in power. And it is crystal clear that she wasn't being targeted by China or Russia. She was living in a town that is the epicenter of all development of technology for our intelligence community, our space, military and space programs, missile defense. This town, Huntsville, is teeming with people from the FBI because that town is also teeming with spies from our foreign adversaries, from China, from Russia. So in a town that has, who knows, thousands of FBI agents running counterintelligence operations against all of these spies that are in there to come and do things like sit at bars and listen to engineers and scientists talk about things that maybe they shouldn't be talking about in a non-classified setting. You have a town that is teeming with FBI agents, and yet you have a scientist who is being systematically harassed, her home being broken into, her apartment being broken into, her friends being, their residences being broken into, and calling cards being left. And I can tell you, again, the people that I speak to all the time that all of you at home will probably never know about, what I have learned from them and the retaliation that they have received and the particular calling cards that are left in their homes by these members from these security contractors working for Northrop Grumman and others, it all completely matches with the stuff that I've certainly read about Amy Estridge and things that I have seen that the public has not been privy to. There is zero doubt in my mind she was murdered. And there is zero doubt in my mind that it was from Americans. It was not from our foreign adversaries. So I say all of this to say this, and there will be more that you're going to be hearing from myself on the particular topic of Amy Estridge. But I say all of that to say that people's lives are being threatened. Their way of living is being threatened. Their marriages are being threatened. Their physical safety is being threatened. This happens, and this continues to happen. And members of Congress that are watching, this is something that you got to look into, because our democracy cannot survive with this kind of stuff going on. This is not the America I want to be living in, and I would venture to guess all of you watching at home don't want to live in either. But people their lives are in jeopardy, and this has got to come to a stop. Anyway, folks, thanks for tuning in. Thank you very much to our mods for volunteering their time today. I truly, truly appreciate it. And again, if you enjoy our program, please hit the subscribe button. Please hit the like button. Please leave a comment. I try to read all of the comments. I try to respond to them. All of those things really help us grow our show. We recently changed the category of our show from science to news and politics, and YouTube has pretty much completely stopped recommending us organically. So we really need your help to turn that around. So anyway, thanks for tuning in. I hope everyone has a wonderful Sunday. And I can't announce the guest that we will have this coming Sunday, but it's going to be big. So you're going to want to tune in, tell your friends about our show, and thanks for tuning in.